Hey there, Trevor Dodd with Coldwell Banker Realty, and here are 3 different things that you may have not thought about when looking to buy a townhome on the negative side. So, number 1, you don't really have any land most of the time. So, take a look at the listing, see how much property you're actually getting. It's usually pretty obvious when it comes to townhomes because you'll have a front yard and a backyard sometimes, or you'll just have a front yard and then the backyard is basically your garage, your driveway in there. And sometimes you don't even have much of a front yard either. Sometimes your townhome sort of just has this tiny little bit of area and then you got a sidewalk right there. So really take note on how much land comes with the townhome, because land can be one of the most pricey things when it comes to buying a new home in a nice area. So location, location, location. You hear that about real estate all the time. So that's usually why townhomes get built in the first place, right? So you can often find yourself spending a lot of money on a beautiful townhome because, you know, you get nicer finishes, the home's pretty decent size, reasons like that. But then you run into the problem where you're not actually getting the most valuable part, which would be the actual land in that location. So that's what home builders do, or townhome builders do, is they buy a plot of land or two and combine them, and then they tear down what's currently there and they put a ton of townhomes, and they can make a lot of money off of that because as I said before, the most expensive part, or not the most expensive, but a very pricey part is the land. So once you divvy it up into all these houses, you can make a pretty hefty profit. So it's something to consider when you're looking to buy a townhome. One thing off of that too is when you're looking at how much the land actually costs, you can actually look at what it would cost you to buy a piece of land in that area and sort of divide, I mean, it's a very rough estimate, but sort of divide the amount of land you'd be getting with your townhome into that number of whatever example you're looking at, sort of to get an idea of what price maybe it would actually be worth. So that's one really important thing there, is lack of land. Another thing that is very important to think about when buying a townhome is the community around it. So it's very reliant on the HOA and the other homeowners. So depending on how these HOA works, that'll depend on the value and how it's kept in your townhome, because you see it out here in Georgia. You see these townhome communities, usually they're a little bit older. Over time their HOA sort of dissipates or gets some not the nicest people sort of running it, rather than having a company or something. You get individuals that live there, and you just get these bad situations where essentially your HOA just isn't doing its job. You're all you're putting money into it, but then the outside of the home start looking really bad. No one's keeping them up on it, and that brings the value of your home down. Not to mention you're all attached to each other, right? So this is where you're really reliant on your neighbors. If your neighbors aren't taking care of their townhome right next to you, and then they end up selling it for a really low amount, I mean, you're right next door, you're attached to the same building, so it's going to bring your value down a lot if they're not taking care of it. And also damages in their home can affect damages in your home. I mean, if they have a big water leak because they're not being smart about something, or if they start a fire because they left their Christmas tree lights on all night and it's a real tree, or situations like that. So you have to think about these things when you're looking to buy a townhome, because most people, you get into it, you get emotional, you see how beautiful it is, and you start visualizing yourself living there, but you're just not thinking about these things. Another thing to note when it comes to the neighbors and the HOA is the noise level too, because if depending on how it's built, you don't always have a really good sound barrier between the two townhomes. So if your neighbor ends up being someone who likes to party a lot, or it just loves music, you might be suffering for a long time till that neighbor moves, unless you guys can make some sort of agreement. So these are all things to consider. The third thing I'd like to talk about is sort of similar to that. It's HOA creep. So HOA, yes, they can, depending on your location, they can do a lot for you. So sometimes they're taking care of all the yards, all the greenery in the area, making sure everything looks really nice. Depending on the townhome community, HOA typically would also be a part of paying for the pool area, if there's a pool, tennis courts, whatever there is there, the gate system, HOA. Sometimes HOA will also take care of the roofs. And also sometimes they take care of the water. I've even seen newer builds here in actually in Smyrna and Mableton. I saw some towards some new build townhome communities that were actually including Wi-Fi in their price as well for the HOA, and it was still pretty affordable. But this is what you got to think about, is HOA creep. So most people don't think about this, but over time, depending on how the HOA is being ran, if it's a separate company, or if it's ran by the individuals who live there, whatever it is, what can happen is you join in right when the building's being built, you get into that townhome, and then you actually see the HOA start to rise every year. You're probably already paying a pretty good chunk to live in a nicer townhome community, but that chunk can keep going up and up and up and up and up. And on top of that, you got your taxes that can go up if people make improvements to the building or around the outside of the building. All these things can reset the taxes. They reassess it and you get taxed more. So you both have the HOA and the taxes that can start to continue to cost more and more, and you're paying that on top of your mortgage payment. So that's another thing people don't always think about. This is a big one when people are going to look to buy. They sort of forget that HOA for townhomes can be very expensive, especially when you're looking closer to the city. So you got to really pay attention to that, because something that may seem like it's in your price range when you're looking at a monthly payment amount might be out of your price range once you consider the HOA fees. So these are all things to consider when you're looking into buying a townhome. I hope this video was helpful for you, at least to get some ideas going. If you'd like to chat further about buying a townhome, let me know, give me a call, send me a text, leave a comment below. I'm going to make another video about townhomes and some of the positive sides to it, since I know this one was a little bit about the negatives, but hopefully you found this video helpful, and I'll see you in the next one. Trevor Da, out.